Hey everyone, and welcome to csforeveryone.com. I'm your host, Robert Bice, and in this video we're going to jump into our very first day of coding, and we're going to do it in a language called JavaScript. Now, as you may have read in the programming languages abstracted stuff that I wrote, all the programming languages that you use nowadays, that everyone uses nowadays, they all have the same main constructs behind them. They all have variables, they all have loops, they all have if statements, they all have functions, blah, blah, blah. And so in this video, we're first going to set up our environment, which is, your environment is essentially just what you write your code on, what you run it in, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to create variables in JavaScript. So as I've said, this is in JavaScript, not Java. Java and JavaScript are not related. If someone says, hey, I want to learn Java, and they're doing JavaScript, you say, no, bad programmer. That is not right. You can't do that. JavaScript and Java, not the same thing. The only reason the names are the same are honestly because like back in the 90s or something like that, when Java was first becoming really big, the makers of JavaScript were like, hey, let's, kind of ride on those coattails a little bit. Just kind of sit under the wave and, ride in the wake of Java, which is basically how I live my life. I pretty much go every day riding the coattails of others and living off the success of others. That's essentially my life story. But anyway, not gonna bore you with those details. Let's go ahead and jump into getting our environment set up. So go ahead and if you're on a Mac, you're gonna want to, well actually this is independent of both, Windows or Mac or Linux, whatever you're on, go ahead and open up your browser and go to google.com or the Goog, whatever you want to call it. And type in Visual Studio. Oh, look at there, it's already typed on mine. Visual Studio Code. And then go ahead and download it. You just click that, you download it, it installs, you run it. Pretty simple stuff. And then, once it's installed, go ahead and search for Visual Studio Code. If it doesn't pop up on here, it's probably in your applications folder, wherever you put it when you installed it. You should be able to find it. Go ahead and open that up. So this is what we're going to, you should have a blank window like this. Go ahead and do File, Save As, and put it on your desktop and name it My First JS.html. That's important, .html. And then save. And so now we have a blank HTML file. That doesn't really matter right now. We'll get into that stuff later. Basically, HTML files are what your browser uses to process what you want to display on the browser. It also interprets JavaScript for you. So browsers interpret JavaScript. So basically our plan here, our attack plan, if you will, is to write our JavaScript in here, save it into, the file that we made right here, and then open it in our browser. And the browser will interpret that code and run it for us. So the very first thing you need to do is you need to make something called a scripts tag. Just ignore that, basically. You can go ahead and just enter a lot. Pretend it's a blank file. This is where we do our JavaScript. The scripts tags themselves, that's something to do with HTML. It's not really that important right now. We'll get into HTML later because I feel like everyone should know that nowadays to be at least, for a web developer, obviously, but even nowadays, HTML is pretty important to know. But for now, since we're just learning the fundamentals of computer science and how to write code and how programs operate, you don't need to know what that means. Just let it be there. Don't forget it because you need it, but it doesn't matter if you know what it means or not. Eventually you'll understand. But for now, we are in our JavaScript environment. So these lines here, this is where we're going to write our JavaScript code and run it. So if you want to do a quick little test, go ahead and type console.log and then open up a pair of parentheses, and within those parentheses, open up a pair of quotation marks, and Visual Studio Code will go ahead and create the second ones for you. And within here, go ahead and type, this is my first program. And at the very end of the line, put a semicolon. Then go to File, Save. And so what we have is a script that it will log to the console, and I know you don't know what that means right now, but eventually you'll understand. By the end, you'll know what a console is. It will log the phrase, this is my first program, to the console. So let's go ahead and open up our program. So right-click your file, go to Open With, and then Google Chrome or whatever your browser is. If you haven't messed with anything, you can just click it on its own, and it will, by default, open to your browser. And so what you have is an empty, there's nothing displayed here. That's okay, that doesn't matter. What you need to do now is right click and then go to inspect element. And this is on Windows or Mac or Linux, it's all the same. So inspect element, and something down here will pop up. Ignore all of these things. These are what web developers, myself, uses to, you know, analyze things. Doesn't matter. You'll get to that later. What you want to do is you want to go to console. So go to right here and click console. And then it will say, this is my first program. So the console is essentially where your JavaScript will be outputted. Outputted? Is that a word? Who knows? Outputted. It's where your program will spit out, if you console.log something, it will go right here. So let's go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code and then do another console.log. Hey guys, go ahead and save that and then refresh. And then hey guys is right there. That's it. You are now ready to go. If you have this displaying in your console, you've done it. You are officially a JavaScript programmer. Go get a job at Google or Mozilla Firefox, whatever you want to. I don't think the company's just called Mozilla, not Firefox. Firefox is the browser. Anyway, so let's talk about variables real quick. So a variable is essentially, as you have read on the programming languages abstracted, a variable is essentially just something that stores a value. It's a name that can get linked to a value in the computer's memory. So to create a variable, you need to type var for var, which stands for, you know, variable. Who would have thought? And then you can put the name of it right here. So my first variable, and then you can set it to equals 5. So we've created our very first variable. Let's analyze what we've done here. And this is essentially what the programming languages abstracted looks like, minus the var and the semicolon. But so var tells JavaScript that you're going to make a variable. That's important. You could technically get away without putting var, but don't do that. And I'll get into what that means later on when you learn about scope. But for now, it doesn't really matter. And then the name of your variable, and you can name this whatever you want. You could literally name it. You can name it that. That's fine. You can do that. That totally works. The issue is if you want to console.log that variable name, you don't want to have to retype. You just want to type my first variable. So watch this. We can do console.log my first variable. And go ahead and save that. Open. Go to your console. 5. It printed 5. Pretty neat. So that is how variables work. That's how the variable construct itself works. Now we need to actually talk about the types of variables that you can have. These are otherwise known as data types. Data types, yay, fun. Fun. I just bought this keyboard today, so I'm kind of screwing up with maintaining my accuracy. So this is a number data type. In other programming languages, it's called like an integer or a double or whatever you want to call it. Well, doubles are... Ignore that. Pretend I didn't say that. This is sometimes called an integer, a whole number. JavaScript calls them just number data types. So JavaScript considers this and this to be the same data type. So decimals and whole numbers are essentially the same. They're kind of treated a little bit differently when you do types of math with them, but we'll get into that later. So that's your first data type is number. The number data type, which is, as you would expect, numbers. So 5, 50, 500, 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, 5 million, 5 billion, 5 trillion? I don't know. I gotta drop out of college. I don't know my numbers, how they scale up. So if you notice here, I've done a little magic. This is called a comment. C-O-M-M-E-N-T, comment. A comment is essentially something that the browser will not attempt to run. Comments are there purely for the programmers. This will not get run. You can put anything here and your code would work no problem. So what this means is that anything, once you put the 2 slashes, anything after that on that line will not be considered. So you could put whatever you want after that line, but the split second you hit enter, your stuff is being considered again, and Visual Studio Code will say, hey, I don't know what the heck you're doing there. So That's just what that is. So we've created a variable, and we've named it my first var, and we've given it a value of 5. So let's create another variable, my second. In fact, let's name these better. So this is going to be, let's rename this to my num variable. You know what? My num. Short, to the point, simple. So var my, and this is our next data type. It's called a string. And a string is essentially just a sequence of characters. So, hello, I am a string data type. And we can console.log my string. Go ahead and save. Oops. Go ahead and save. There we go. Go back to the browser. And then refresh. And then it will log, hello, I am a string data type, because that's what we told it to do right there. We created a string called hello, or called my string, and gave it a value of hello, I am a string data type. So, and then there's another data type called char. It's not, JavaScript technically doesn't differentiate between these, but most programming languages do. So we're going to go ahead and teach all that as well. This is called a char. A char is literally just a single character. So C, or A, or W, or E. And these need to end with semicolons. Don't forget the semicolon. JavaScript is pretty forgiving. It will usually kind of understand what you're trying to say and correctly fix it. But you need to tell JavaScript, hey, I'm done with this line of code. So this semicolon here tells JavaScript, tells the browser that the line 4 in our code right there, 4, you can't see what I'm pointing at, is done. So it's important to have the semicolons. Now, here's a trick question. What data type is this? It's a number surrounded by quotation marks. Oh, the answer is a string. So don't let that fool you. A string, if you have a sequence of quotation marks around anything, whether it's numbers, that, or letters, or whatever characters, that is all a string, and you can log that, and it will work no problem. I keep missing that key. This new keyboard's killing me. And then, boom, there it is. It logged it no problem. So that's that. And then there are a couple other data types we'll get into later on, but the last one we're going to do is something called a Boolean. So just go ahead and make one. True or false is equal to true. A Boolean variable is either true or false. It cannot have any other values. So a Boolean variable is something that is either true or false. So they're good for, like, if you want to flag something in your code, like, has the user put in their name yet? If they have, then set that variable equal to true. If it's not, set it equal to false. And if statements use those all the time. Loops can use them all the time. Functions use... Booleans are extremely important. So those are the 3 main data types that we have, that we are going to be covering in the beginning. Eventually we'll jump into the more advanced data types, which gets into like custom object types and blah blah blah, but it doesn't really matter right now. So if you're bored, you can go ahead and try to create a few more variables if you want, name them whatever you want, like my name equals Robert, and you can console.log that if you want. So what you can do for fun, if you find this fun right now, you can just make some variables and log them. Why not? I mean, what else is there to do at this point in our lives? In the next video, that's what they're called, videos. In the next video, we're going to cover the operators that you can perform on these data types. So like, if you have 2 number data types, you can add them together, or you can subtract them, or, you know, multiply, blah, blah, blah. So I hope that that'll make things more fun once you get into operators, and especially once we jump into like if statements and more things that allow you to really interact with your program. Right now it's just pretty, we're just going straight down line by line doing stuff. But hopefully you found this a little bit enlightening and slightly fun, and if you had any issues getting your environment set up at all, feel free to leave a comment in the video or on the post on csforeveryone.com, whatever you want to do. See y'all later.